He's like running around in live stream chats telling her like, don't talk to this guy.
Destiny or Vaush.
That Sneako meme where he had like all of the lefty streamers lined up and they had like the same similar haircut and bunch of weird looking things. That starts to ring true every time I see it.
People on the left don't sell you a lifestyle. People on the right do. If I say like, what does it mean to live as a conservative? I've got like the Redpill gives you this whole guide of living. If I say, what does it mean to live as a progressive?
I'm not trying to be Vaush, like I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I said, Redpill adjacent.
Okay, yeah, Jordan Peterson counts as a...
That's not what I said. You don't listen very well, so every time you reply, it has nothing to do with what I just said.
Conservatives tend to be more empowering and give more agency than liberals. There's literally the phrase, conservatives never see themselves as poor people, just temporarily embarrassed billionaires.
What part about that do you disagree with?
Health at every size is saying you can be healthy and beautiful no matter what size you are, and it's okay. It's okay to be a victim of your body, or it's okay to be a victim of hypothyroidism. It's okay to be a victim of your fast metabolism. There's nothing you can do to change it. That's okay. The more extreme versions of health at every size are that. That's not a celebration of agency. It's a direct contradiction.
Slogan.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
I think they're...
I actually noticed this from the video essayists on YouTube. I think I made the mistake of watching a few of their videos.
Yeah.
And I was asking myself why a lot of these video essayists who are like super left-leaning are not bigger or more popular, generally speaking. And I think two of the reasons I discovered is I think the language that they use is extremely unappealing to a lot of folks. And so it kind of turns them off just from a cultural standpoint. And then I think, secondly, actually, there's probably three reasons. I think the other thing is they, much like Brittany, code so much of their discussions on serious topics and so many caveats and like such an effort to not appear problematic that it almost feels like they're saying nothing by the end of it, which makes like listening to them incredibly frustrating and uninteresting. And then I think the last thing is what Sneako described, which I think most of them are just kind of... I don't know how to say this. Yeah. It just feels like they're so lame as hell. Like... I remember someone, like, this always comes up, but it's like, oh, well, you know, the left has plenty of masculine examples that you can follow that would, like, I'm like, bro, no young dude is looking at leftist YouTubers or, like, leftist creators online, generally speaking, and thinking, like, oh, I would want to emulate these guys in their way of life. So I think everything about the way that they live, the way they look, the way they talk, it's hard for most people to connect with.
The reason why current terminology is a bit cringe is because it's taking over from things that were a bit racist. So we've gone from a bit racist to a bit cringe, but it's like when we're talking about large groups of people, we kind of get stuck. I mean, my nan still says colored people, and I have to try and remember, probably don't say that, but she is my nan. She doesn't mean it badly, you know, it's whatever.
Well,
when you're talking about big groups of people, what else can you do but do these types of things?
It's a usual kind of just like progressive move overcompensation, unfortunately. And it gets to a point where it becomes very, very obvious, right? And so everybody notices it. I don't know.
How do you make it not cringe?
Yeah.
Things being cringe aren't like high on my priority list. So when these types of conversations, I'm like, well, you really
by the way, Stephen, Hans has asked me to tell you that he loves you and he misses you.
I love him and miss him too.
I was gonna say, I think this is something that Stephen had said earlier that I think became ring more true since I started observing these people. But like everything he said about them not actually engaging in actual political action, a lot of this stuff being performative, like just watching the whole recent FD Signifier with like Kidology nonsense where he's like running around in live stream chats telling her like, don't talk to this guy,
Destiny or Vaush.
Don't talk to Vaush, and no, these guys are just gonna use you. At the same time, like he's like making whole ass videos about her but doesn't want to talk in public, wants to keep everything about them is so slimy and just unappealing on an individual level. Just, the way that they act, I just find incredibly cringe. And then you contrast that with people like Nick Fuentes or a lot of right-leaning figure who have, like, irrespective of how terrible they are, like, you can respect the fact that they create their own political movements, are really invested, put their money where their mouth is, create their own platforms, are super progressive in that regards. Like, I don't know, to me, there's something admirable about, like, the fact that their calls to action seem real and that they also follow along with their own financial investment. So for me, watching the way the left discourse happens online and the way a lot of the left creators operate, I don't know, I just think, be it the language they use, their inability to just say things, like that's why I thought Destiny's take today was refreshing. I don't hear too many left streamers talk about taboo subject and be like, which is like, it's okay to say that, but it just feels like for the left they can never do that. They always have to be like, well, I'm not racist and I like trans people.
Is it progressive to be making money off of building your brand by being borderline evil? Question mark?
Oh, whether or not you make money is Oh, by being borderline evil, I don't like whatever. Yeah, I don't know if that's entirely.
Yeah, I just don't know if I would call that progressive.
Wait, who are
Well,
you? Wait, who are we
think
referring
one
to
of
right
the
now?
big
Abba was calling Fuentes progressive.
No, he wasn't.
Okay,
No.
good.
I was saying his business strategy is one that is progressive and that it progresses. But I probably used the word incorrectly, so that's my apology.
As in it actually as in it actually
Like
has
progress
some
is his
sort of
movement.
transformative
Yes, exactly. Like
ability.
it moves forward. Like he doesn't just
Yeah.
say something; he actually creates his political movement, follows through with them, gathers the people. So that's what I meant.
Well, it seems to me, I saw somebody tweet this out yesterday, which I thought was really well stated. Is that basically it seems like unfortunately the more progressive content creators seem to take advantage of people's willingness and desire to want to see change, but cater to them in a way that is sort of very just emotional and purely as a means to prop themselves up as a content creator, make them money, get people to praise them, etc. So they're kind of taking advantage of people who want to see change, not really providing them any change, but making them feel good about the things that they hear and what they in the talking points that they hear, but never actually turning that into any form of action or any kind of actual movement. It's just like an online thing that is meant to sort of continuously feed that content creator. And
Could it just be that people's attention are not at the people that are doing that change because it's not as interesting and drama filled?
that's probably like one of the elements of it, but overall you can see the difference between a content creator that actually wants to get something done and a content creator that sort of wants to convince their people that they are the right person.
I mean, the majority
and
of
have
content
the right
creators are all
ideology.
narcissists at the end of the day. Are they really doing anything but
true.
furthering their own interests?
I would say
you
Nick
can
Fuentes
have
absolutely has furthered his interests.
But it's still, yeah.
Or
Exactly.
that can even be part of the narcissism. That can feed into the narcissism, the impact that you're having in the world, or something like that.
I mean, feeding your own interest is not necessarily a bad thing. If it also encapsulates a larger movement, you could also do both at the same time. I think probably for Nick, I don't think he just wants to be the supreme ruler of the world. I think he actually believes in some of the ideas that he has, and irrespective of whether or not you disagree with them, he's garnered an audience that follows him, that supports him financially, that shows up to a lot of events and shows up in person, and does things that are tangible. And so, whether it serves his self-interest or not is really irrelevant to me. I just think
I know
what I
someone in
like.
Germany who did that as well.
Well, like
Yeah, he got more done than Bernie Sanders. So
Okay. I'll also say this. I think when I look at people's political actions and then it not being like anything really tangible, I think the audience is also partially a reflection of that. Because I think audiences don't actually care that deeply how much real change happens. I think the feel good stuff is enough for a lot of them, so they just go with that.
Yeah. And like one of the things that frustrates me about a lot of the online progressive content creation and such is that a lot of it hinges on sort of like this utopian view of the world, that everything needs to get to this utopia and all the problems will be solved. But it's like this massive amount of leap that you have to do to get to the utopia, and nobody's really building the blocks to get to that point. So they're kind of like, oh, well, all of our problems stem from capitalism, so we need to, get rid of capitalism. Well, that doesn't solve the problems now, or even in the near term, or even really in the long term, because in order to dismantle capitalism, you've got so much road work to do to get to the point where you can sustain the population. So it's very
I think that's cope.
based.
I think that's partially cope. And the reason why I say it's partially cope is I think rather than doing something that's tangible, people focus on the macro because it makes themselves feel better. But they actually have the ability on a micro scale to affect a lot of local positive change. They just choose not to do it because it's, maybe it's more enjoyable to feel like you're talking about larger scale problems, but I also think it's irresponsible. And if you really care, you would start on something small. So I think to some degree people don't care that much.
I think
Not as
people
much
come
as
to
they like to believe.
People come to this shit like a religion. I took a fucking sociology course. It's just literally sociology like intro to sociology a couple years ago, and that it's as if I had downloaded all of BreadTube to my brain. Like everything they talk about, all their talking points, all their vocabulary, it was all just from like an intro to sociology course. It like really opened my eyes that all these people had all just taken like 1 or 2 sociology courses and are now just sort of uncritically parroting every single talking point, all the shit about abolishing capitalism, all the shit about how we're like living under oppression and systems of oppression under the government and capitalism and all this shit. Marx had all the right ideas. Capitalism's inherently bad because we're all being exploited and all that stuff. All that shit just came out of like a sociology 1 course. None of these people are like you said, yeah, I don't know. I agree. None of these people are they really care about any of this progress in their local watering holes or anything like that, because they're getting. It's like have you ever met?
It's the
Christians
conversation that we
like,
had with Darius earlier in here today, where Darius will go and talk about all the changes he wants to make in his life, but he doesn't actually do any of them, but he feels he gets all the good feelings just from talking about it.
Exactly. Have you ever met a Christian who's like, I know I'm a good person because I'm a Christian, or something like that, or I'm a Christian, that's how I know I'm a good person, or something? It's like that same shit. I subscribe to this set of beliefs, therefore I know that I'm like, you know, I'm moral and just.
But I think even Christians know that they have to take actions in order to be in alignment with that. Be it going to church, being a lot of them actually donating, be a lot of them doing volunteer work at the church. Like a lot of them do really subscribe.
They go to church. They go to TV/Hassan.
That assumes they're not Christian in name only, and they're actually like reading the Bible or going to church and having a pastor help them or whatever. Because a lot of people will just say they're a Christian, they found God, and get that psychological burden lifted from them, but then never actually go forward with doing anything in line with their religious views.
I would even say religious people probably are responsible for more like good things, charity and shit like that, or religion as a whole, as a system.
It's been.
I would argue that religious
organizing.
people, be it missionary, like whether you agree with it or not, I think they're much more likely to take actions in line with their values than I think like non-religious people would. Because I think their faith really matters to them, and maybe it's fear, maybe it's a bunch of different other things, but at the end of the day, they do take tangible actions. I would say one thing I have noticed about liberals, and I think this kind of plays into the meme that Sneako made about all of them looking the same, is that I don't think they actually believe in self-determination or actions that they can actually take in order to make tangible scales on a minor scale, which can then go on to larger. And I think that also reflects, funny enough, in their appearance. I think that's why you see a lot of libs with like blue hair, no shade to Destiny, or like different like color hair, or like crazy looking piercings or tattoos or really fucked up hair. Part of it is like, okay, there's more freedom to be yourself in the liberal like political ideology, but I think a lot of part of it is also like, what's the easiest thing I can change about myself without actually having to enact any real fucking change, right? I dye my hair.
I think this might be explained for the same reason that more charitable work gets done through religion. Is just a cultural thing. I think it's more cultural to put boots on grounds and like, you know, put bread in people's mouths and shit like that. Whereas for the progressive stuff, it's all just a cultural aesthetic, and it's not part of the culture to contribute to any local public works or anything like that, because it's all about defeatism and just recognizing, oh, we're fucked, man. We're totally living under the Star Wars empire or whatever.
Or that it's a waste to put anything into that system, and so you need to replace the system before you can really do that.
Yeah, but
and so it never
maybe they
goes
have. Maybe they have.
from
Why do
step
they have
zero.
that interaction with the political system? But like maybe conservatives don't nearly seem to do the same.
To what degree?
Like I would argue that I think conservatives.
I think we're getting to the point where conservatives are starting to be conspiratorial. For a while, we had progressives that were like, oh man, the system, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, they're all trying to circumvent and undermine the progressive system or progressive values. That's why they're sabotaging Bernie, this, that, or the other. But now we've got conservatives that think that, you know, the deep state in the swamp are circumventing, undermining conservative shit too. So.
Okay, I'm actually curious. Do you guys feel like conservatives are better at mobilizing their bases for voting purposes? Like, because I've always understood it as like conservatives are generally less of the population. However, they're very effective politically speaking because of actions. Am I incorrect?
No, in the United
They
States,
don't
conservatives
eat
are very
others,
effective
no.
right now because the system favors them. That's what is like barely
Well,
keeping them hanging on right now.
There's
But
less
didn't they work to make that system favor them?
Nope,
Was that
that's
not
just
a
part of
concerted
that's
effort?
intrinsically just like giving land the ability to have like a say in voting. That's just a thing that's baked in hardcore to the American system.
Okay,
and
so
the
like
fact is that right
gerrymandering
now,
and stuff like that.
everybody gerrymanders. There's no easy way to get to escape like gerrymandering. But the system right now is just set up to favor land over people, and conservatives tend to be more spread out. That's just luck on their part. They didn't even earn that advantage. Like they didn't even like rig the system. That's just like.
So there was a book that I read in the early 2000s by Eric Alterman called Why We're Liberals. And one of the things that I felt was really fascinating about that book was he goes into a section about, because he talks a lot about like liberals and being progressive and all the innate infighting, you know, that comes with progressive views, and talked about how conservatives are really good at consolidating and coming together. But one of the things he talked about is one of the major consolidating points for conservatives is that religion is still predominantly conservative, or conservatives are still predominantly religious, and there are a lot of churches that organize around that, and that churches put in a lot of effort to inform their people about important elections coming up, important issues to vote on or vote against, and will do things like do drives to raise funds and help people out and bring them together, and then get buses organized to get people to polling stations and such. And so they have a very strong unifying point to them that just doesn't really exist as much on the progressive or liberal side.
But it doesn't come from bad reasons, though, right? So, like, Donald Trump, for example, wouldn't disavow the KKK, but we all just pulled Jeremy Corbyn apart because he didn't react quickly enough to anti-Semitism within his party. So, I mean, like, yeah, we do have the infighting, but it doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. But obviously, it does benefit conservatives.
Corbyn's a fucking loser. That was his problem, okay? Not the anti-Semitism thing.
Okay. He was incredibly favorable in the polls up until...
Yeah, for a little bit, but the anti-Semitism
until
should have
that
been...
point! Okay.
I'm pretty sure anti-Semitism should have been following. Maybe you keep saying it in a retarded voice louder and louder. Somebody will agree with you.
I'm not saying.
I'm pretty sure anti-Semitism should have been following Corbyn around for like a fucking decade, hasn't it? Like, anti-Semitism has been things that people have accused Corbyn and other people in leftist parties and Labour Party in the UK for a long time. I don't think it was like a new thing that was the one thing that shut him down.
No, that was a really big part of it, and because he showed weakness in not being quick enough to deal with the issue, that was his downfall.
I think the issue is that Corbyn is a fucking loser. Everybody saw him as a fucking loser. And people were just like, you know what? The anti-Semitic shit is coming up again, and fuck him.
This was just an example, okay? Which was a good example in the context of this conversation, all right? Sure.
Okay, I just looked up the book. It was 2008. So, but I recommend you guys read it. Maybe a little dated now, but Why We're Liberals by Eric Alterman.
Yeah, but Destiny, I'm surprised at your take on this. One of the things you've talked about in the past is like the ability for conservatives to like value community, value family, value like camaraderie and all of those type of things. And that's like the true advantage of conservatives.
That can be an advantage, but the only reason conservatives are able to maintain the power they have in the United States right now is because of the structure of our government favoring land over people. That's the only reason. Without that, they would have almost no voice right now. Conservatism is getting less and less popular. It seems to be the case, right? Hillary Clinton won by what, 3 or 4 million votes? Biden won by what, 11 million votes? Like, the conservatives are hanging on by the skin of their teeth because the Senate favors land over votes. Like, that's like the one thing they have. And then McConnell the turtle is there trying to block every possible thing that can come out of the Senate just because of the land thing, not because of the people or the popularity.
I mean, the conservative popular tallies, I wouldn't say are hanging on by a thread. It's still pretty substantial. It's
really
40,
what was the last
50% of the country still it's in there. Right?
What was Kerry versus Bush? Like, what was the last Republican that won the popular vote? I'm curious.
They don't win, but it's still substantial. I wouldn't
say substantial, but they're losing by bigger margins. I'm just saying that, like, you can say it's substantial. I'm not saying there are no Republicans. I'm just saying that, like, systemically, the reason why they're able to hold on to the power they do is because right now the system is hardcore favoring land over people. That's the only reason why they've held on as well as they could, right? Like, Trump can have a dominating presence in the Senate and the presidency despite losing by, what, 4 million votes?
Maybe for the presidency, but Congress is still going to be...
Yeah.
No, that's not true. The Senate, right, again, also allots votes more to land than to people. The only reason why I have both halves of the Senate is because... Sure. Wait, you do or don't understand?
I understand, because if it were strictly by population, then cities would be electing every representative or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Lean blue. I get it.
Yeah, I think that gets complicated though, right? Like, should the most populous cities completely dominate?
No,
like,
I never said that. Never made the claim otherwise. I think it's fine the way the Senate is balanced. I'm just saying it's important to notice that, yeah.
I know you're not making that claim. I'm just trying to make sure we agree on that. So, like, there's inefficiencies in the current process for sure, but I don't know how we rectify those. So, like, I guess it seemed like you were assigning some level of intent, and maybe you weren't, and I misread that.
No, I'll say very clearly, I'm okay with the system set up as is. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think that land should be able to vote. I think states do have interests, but it's important to realize that when Republicans are running around screaming like, he won the election, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, he kind of did, but not with the people, with the states, right? Donald Trump was a deeply unpopular president. He lost by, I think, the largest margin of any president that's won an election in the history of the United States, and conservatives are losing popularity in a lot of areas, but structural advantages keep them where they are. I think that's important to recognize. Not saying we should change the structure, but it's important to recognize those things as fact.
Got you. And I don't think they would win by as much as they do if the left wasn't so, like, divided. Like, the whole progressive liberal versus leftist thing. And I was actually just having a conversation with somebody about this, but I think that's ultimately what hurts us on the left more so than anything else.
Bro, it hurts a little bit, but it's hard to say because electorally we don't fight that as much as conservatives have fought it electorally. I don't know what the answer is there. What the fuck is this?
I mean,
I guess I'm curious about your. You know more about the electoral system and stuff. I'm curious when you say that conservatism is extremely unpopular or something. Like, I feel like the popular vote was within what, like 5% or something still, right?
5% is a lot of people for when you were talking to the entirety of the American public, right?
Yeah, but that's to say that something's unpopular if it's almost 50-50.
I didn't say it was unpopular. I didn't say there's no conservatives. I'm just saying that like conservatives will often
extremely unpopular.
Whatever.
I'm curious
if I said extremely unpopular,
term.
then I'm wrong and fucking retarded. I was a fucking retard if I said that. What I'm saying is that they're not winning by massive margins, even when they control all three parts of the fucking executive, legislative, whatever. Even when they're controlling everything, it's not like they're winning by popular mandate. They're winning because they have structural advantages.
Okay,
That's
I'm
what
asking
I'm
because I want to understand this context where we can call something that is almost half the country and is like 70 to 80 million people. We can call it like extremely unpopular.
Sorry, if I said extremely popular, I'm a fucking retard. And the next time you see me, you should beat the fucking shit out of me. Okay, I was wrong if I said that. Okay,
Will do.
thank you.
I just got back. Why are we beating the shit out of you?
Because he deserves it.
Your mom wants it to happen. She loves it. She loves
My
watching it.
mom just passed away a few days ago.
Well, I'm sorry, but
She
thanks.
definitely did not.
You really brought down the energy of the room now, okay?
I don't care. Much like the way Destiny denied house phones mom, your mom is definitely still alive.
I did not deny
She is,
house phone's
yeah.
mom, okay? Jesus.
Actually, I haven't heard from her today.
I
How
did.
fucked up would it be if she died? That'd be
So
wild.
fucked. And then when I come on to talk about it tomorrow, nobody would believe me. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard something that I liked, and that's what caused me to jump in here.
What was
I
it?
heard
Because you were called a
Abba say-
person of color?
No, it's when you said that people should clean their room. I was like, yo, that's a Jordan Peterson take. This is great. This is awesome. Let me jump in.
Oh my fucking god.
It's great.
Did I
just
say that?
Because it's a Jordan
Or did I
Peterson take?
did I say something? Or you mean I said something similar?
You said that people should focus on micro issues and fixing their communities rather than macros into just trying to like evoke morality upon themselves.
I just don't
Why
think.
is because it's difficult to tackle macro issues. It's a lot easier. You can actually affect change more immediately by addressing the micro issues, which in the end, if you address enough of those micro issues, will have an overall macro change effect.
True.
Music to my ears, yes.
Yeah.
Got literal music going on as well. How's your party, Abba?
It's really easy for people to, like as Abba was saying earlier, for people to sort of make themselves feel good about talking about these big changes, but unfortunately it's just a guaranteed way to paralyze yourself on actually affecting any change at all.
I think the point I was trying to make is that I just felt like the way I feel a lot of leftist streamers tackle their political issues seems to be the same way they lead their personal lives, meaning that I think they do very little self-actualization and don't put any effort for it, and I think it shows also in their political actions. I don't know who said that quote, but like the way you do some things is the way you do everything. Like I don't know, sometimes I feel like that rings true.
Yes.
I don't know why, but that Sneako fucking meme where he had like all of the fucking lefty streamers lined up and they had like the same similar haircut and bunch of weird looking things that most people in the general population would find fucking weird. I don't know. It just that starts to ring true every time I see it because it feels as though their actions are similar to that.
I would say.
Hold
that's
on,
more
you gotta
emblematic
keep in
than-
mind that conservatives are the same shit. How many fucking MAGA dudes with those weird fucking sunglasses come out of their trucks to talk about how much they were offended by the fucking halftime show or the last thing that Biden said or whatever? Like, everybody's got their stereotypes.
You're just talking about like selling an aesthetic as part of a package of like political.
He's just getting his new programming from Sneako. That's what he's getting.
Well, I would
Yeah,
say
I'm
that
unplugging from the Matrix, and I think what I've realized as I've begun unplugging is it just seems like the fucking libs. Okay, I'm just joking, but it just appears as though when it comes to actual political action, The right seems to be better at engaging in it. From
Okay,
what
is
I've
Sneako
seen.
good at political action? Are the fucking Andrew Tate people good at political action? No, they're picking up an aesthetic, and that's part of their cultural identity that's being sold to them or whatever.
Well,
I don't know, man. The Tate's,
I disagree.
think Tate was
I-
incredibly effective. You've got a guy that talks about objectifying women his whole life, and look how many women he objectified at one time. 75 working for him, all the thinking that they're dating him. I think it was pretty impressive.
Also,
Whether
what are
you
we
think it's
saying,
great or
like,
hold
what
on,
are we defining as political effectiveness? Because I wouldn't call, like, if I were going to talk about political effectiveness, I would talk, like, for right wing, I'd consider Nick Fuentes to be someone we talk about when it comes to political effectiveness. So
I think the
Andrew
red
Tate
pill.
doesn't really-
I think the red pill is similar, Jason, because I think even though the issues may be gender related or dating related to some degree, but when they talk about the Matrix or whatever, like there is a certain element of politics involved that it does feel very real when it comes
Relate
to the red
it
pill.
to politics. How does it relate?
Yeah, I feel
I think it's
more
adjacent.
so-
Yeah, I think it's very
No,
much
but
adjacent.
explain to us how. Instead of just saying it.
Because I think when you consider the way that their ideology moves forward, it basically leans into everything that's potentially conservative. So whether they want less sexual freedom for people, whether they feel like, to some degree women should be subservient, whether they feel as though you should be financially independent from the system and they're for low taxation, like a lot of their views track on very, very, very strongly with how the right lives. And that's why they do a lot of the religious grifts and stuff like that. So the idea that the red pill is not political is, I think, is super bizarre. Everything
I'm
about
gonna
it is.
go out on a limb and say it's kind of unfair that the average conservative wants less rights for women. Okay, that seems a bit harsh.
It can be political, but how does that translate to like a real world impact?
What he's saying is that people
Thank
on the
you,
left,
thank you.
people on the left don't sell you a lifestyle. People on the right do, right? If I say, like, what does it mean to live as a conservative? I've got, like, the red pill gives you this whole guide of living. If I say, what does it mean to live as a progressive? I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. Like, find a black person and kiss his boots in public? Like, there's no guide there. It's just, like, perpetual, like,
I
shame
think
and
it's a-
agony.
And even
Yeah,
beyond that, not only is their framework pretty clear and concise to most folks, they're incredibly effective at getting their messages out to a lot of people and making a lot of young, impressionable minds. And I would also say that they tend to live by a lot of the values that they themselves espouse. Not always, not all the time, but it just seems like they are far more effective at doing so. So there just appears to be some congruence in between what they're espousing in terms of politics and the way that they live.
But isn't the whole issue with the Andrew Tate type people is that they can't give advice to the average man because they aren't the average man. So what they come out with is a bunch of shit that can't be applicable to like most men.
Yes, but it does tell them to take accountability for their lives, to take actions to be able to actually fix things. They give them tangible stuff that they can actually do. Like the right and the red pill's ideology in regards to how they say like young folks should act is actually far more appealing because it gives agency to the individual and demands that they take actions to make themselves feel better. And I think that kind of ideology leads to a better political involvement than the other one, which is the left, which is just like society, society, society.
Abby is
I
preaching.
mean, there is
Jesus.
some self-help stuff in there. I don't think anyone's denying that. but
I think
it's
there's a
It's not like a package of self-help though. Like the right definitely has a more consolidated package of self-help and lifestyle living and such that the left just doesn't have. So I would agree with that. I think the way Destiny presented that actually was a really good way of kind of packaging that up nicely. But I
would've
still like when
assumed
I
that
think
was
political
because-
effect. Like I even though you can be changing people's opinions and like causing a little bit of a social movement, when I think of political effectiveness, the reason why I was thinking of like Nick Fuentes is because I think of somebody who actually gets senators to sign on to their particular like brand of politics and such, and to be part of AFPAC, be funded by AFPAC, and such, where you're actually bringing the politics into the real world politics stage to affect things like what is being drafted for legislation and who's voting on what legislation.
To be fair, I don't think Fuentes has gotten that part to where he's like influencing the legislation, but I know he
Nah,
wants
not
to.
quite. But we've had a couple of AFPACers draft legislation, so. So
I mean, when you were saying like the left doesn't have a pre-packaged thing for self-help, but isn't that because people that are left progressive leaning, they're not scared to go to therapy and have already been doing a lot of these things as it is?
Bro, people on the
Whereas
left
we're-
are all on SSRIs and depressed and like, no, what? I don't.
Yup, true.
yeah,
like-
they're not, I would say that they're not
But
getting
they're not
over their shit.
scared
It's-
of going to therapy.
But that's them following the prescription
No.
of what you should do, right?
They're not
It's
like a lot of
seeking
right
these
people
treatments.
that are terrified of going to a doctor.
I don't know.
about
It
this
seems
shit.
all chaotic to me. It seems like some of the few unifying calls is like therapy good, or something, whatever. But there's not really an overall lifestyle.
Therapy in and of itself is useless. Okay, if you just use therapy in a vacuum, that's useless. The self-actualizing part I would argue is more important than therapy, and that if therapy is to be effective, it has to work in conjunction with the tangible actions that you actually have to take. What I think is, I've been having this discourse for a while, but whenever I say like, oh, one thing that I say about the red pill and all those folks who kind of live that thing is their messaging is incredibly infectious. And if I'm an individual who's sitting at home but feel miserable in my life, their messaging is probably the one that's most apt towards me because it encouraged me to get off my ass, encouraged me to get involved, encouraged me to take care of myself, encouraged me to be more financially literate, encouraged me to be more financially involved. So all this messaging is what men, and generally young men, want to hear in regards to how they can better themselves. Whereas when the left just says go to therapy, it's like, bitch, how's that gonna help me? Like, I'm still broke. You know what I mean? Like,
I was giving that as an example of like left people aren't already scared of these progressive ideas already, whereas right-leaning people seem more reticent to get involved in that already. Because there's already like loads of self-help that doesn't have a political leaning that has existed like long before Jordan Peterson came along, you know?
Yeah, but when you're a part of a minority class that doesn't have a lot of political power, you got to understand that messaging is going to be more powerful. I don't know what happened and why the left like gave up agency. Like the message used to be, hey, you can have agency in the things that you are directly involved in, but root for systemic change. But then as Jordan Peterson became more popular, people started to demonize agency as a whole, and that's where like I don't know why the left gave up this ground. But the fact that they ceded all of that power to the right.
What is demonization of agency? What does that mean?
Like everything is a systemic problem. Nobody can do anything to improve the circumstances. It's all white supremacy, white colonialism, anti-blackness.
The individual is.
And if they hold on,
people don't take
and if they don't endorse that kind of rhetoric, then they're very tacit or very reluctant to actually wail against it effectively. And so it almost seems like they're implied agreeing with it because they refuse to actually speak out against it.
I think, well, there's a few things being missed here. I think the left is like very strong in its advocacy towards like protesting or something like that. We saw that during like BLM, even violent protesting, and even assuming the agency to like, you know what, actually it's better to detriment these systems or businesses because, you know, that'll whatever propel some radical change or something like that. In the red pill, they sell their own fucking misery, you know, woe is me stories too about how the reason all these men are, you know, whatever, you know the whole story. Like women are liberated so they don't need the men, so now they can just go fuck around, and now there's all these lonely sad men or whatever, and that's why this is the cause of your misery. There's a fair mix on both sides, I think, but in general I think you're right. It may just not be perfectly congruent to compare progressivism, which seeks for like direct political advocacy to realize a set of political ideals, versus the red pill, which I think you're right, does offer the individual, like here are some things that you can and should do to improve your individual personal quality of life. I just don't think that's the goal of progressivism.
But isn't the difference just that we do consider societal systemic oppression and that the right just don't at all? Like, it's not like we blame everything on systemic oppression. It's just that we acknowledge that it is a thing.
There's too much on the left.
Right? Really?
I think there's too much defeatism. Yeah.
I don't know.
Like the problem that I see, or not really problem, but like a thing that I observed that's a key difference between conservative rhetoric and progressive rhetoric, and it goes back to the individual versus the collective, is that with conservatives they actually really keep things simple, really good at messaging, because the answers tend to be very, very simple, right? And oftentimes are on the individual. Here's what you can do to change something now. Clean your room, get in shape, do these little things, right? It's very addressable, it's very immediate. And with progressives, oftentimes it is focusing on the collective and systemic issues. You want to get an answer to them on like why it is that you're having difficulty in life, why you're not able to, get a partner or whatever, why you can't hold down a job. Their answer is going to be very convoluted, complicated, all these systemic things going on. And here's what Marx said about these systems. And it's just like, there's no direct, simple, like easy, here's what you can do right now to give yourself some progress. So the conservatives are really good with that messaging, and that's something that progressives need to learn as well. And but unfortunately, the direction it's moved in, I don't see that happening.
I don't know if conservatives are good with that so much as there's just a lot of overlap between red pill people and conservatism.
I mean, this is just conservatism overall.
Yeah,
like doesn't matter if they're red pill or not.
Yeah, they seem great. Like the thing that I took, because people used to always say Gambit is a conservative, and it became a meme because of how I talk about agency. But like the thing that I tell people is, imagine you're a black person and you're on your deathbed, and your children are at your deathbed, right? and they're saying, and imagine you're ultra poor, and your kids are saying, "Hey, Dad, what should we do?" Or "Hey, Mom, what should we do?" You would never prescribe to them, "Go work for the Democratic Party for the rest of your life, and hopefully some systemic change will twinkle down into you, and then you'll have a better life." Right? You tell them actionable steps that they can take to make their lives better. That's the part where we lose to the right, when we just act as if agency isn't important, because it's motivating, like everything that Albert said, and it's practical. So like, we have to understand like agency is super important.
What are
Yeah.
these actionable steps that the red pills people are saying that are actually any good other than work out? Like, what
Oh
are
my
the...
God, that's a ton.
Well, if you're talking specific,
There's
so if
a
you're talking
ton that-
specifically the red pill, I mean that narrows it down a lot more. But overall, I would say conservatives are better at messaging in simple terms that translate better to people, especially if you're
Oh,
struggling.
I agree that they can be quite good at getting the message across. I'm just saying that their messages kind of suck for the most part. Like red pillars, like Andrew Tate
That's
say,
not what
depression
we're
isn't
talking
real,
about.
but we're trying to say like
Yeah.
this
We're
is
talk-
a
we're
good
talking
message
about-
to be getting
Kelly
across.
Jean,
But-
let me give you another example that's not just the gym meme. They'll tell people to go to work and be the best fucking person at work, and you'll
True.
get a higher salary at some point. Whereas what people on the left will say is, well, go join a union or some shit like that. Like, and I'm not saying that unions can't be powerful and they haven't done like great things for our country, but they're gonna tell people to do things that are personally actionable. And like, go to work and be the best fucking employee you
Do you
can.
think all the
And
people
more
on
than
the left
likely,
aren't trying to do the best at their jobs already?
I'm not. That's
This
not
is
what I'm saying. I'm
mean.
talking about the prescription and the message, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a useless message. Like, what are
No,
the
no,
good
no.
people that are at your job?
It's not. It's
Alright,
not. It's
great,
it's not.
that's
It's
fixed
not.
my
Hold on.
fucking
It's not.
life.
It's not a useless message. Where I have lefties constantly complaining about systemic issues all day long. Me as an individual who wants to take actionable steps to make my life better, I hear from the right, get a good job, make sure your money's in order because that'll eventually bring you to being more attractive to the other party. Get your home in order. Make sure you get your fitness in step. Make sure you start to find ways to make financial freedom a possibility. And the thing that happens is as you take these steps, you actually do notice that your life gets remarkably better. And so you get a feedback loop in where their advice, even though it's maybe basic or simple, is actually having a huge influence on your life. When they're saying stuff like be disciplined and make sure you stick to that stuff, that helps people. People need that kind of framework. The same way a lot of people without any hope need religion, a lot of folks who are young men and who are lost need actionable framework that makes them feel like they have a place in the world, because without that, they're just going to feel lost and they're going to be young adults who don't know where they're supposed to go. I
don't disagree, but I think that the things that you just listed are the most obvious things on the planet.
Yeah, but I wouldn't
like,
listen to
what?
you because you're not somebody I'd want to emulate.
No
But
one
wait, hold on.
listens to me. It's all right.
Stop talking. Hold on.
We're
Stop
all
talking.
impossible
Hold on.
not to
Hold on.
listen to you because your
hold
shit
on.
is
So
loud
let
as
me make
fuck.
this.
Yes, but hold up.
let
But
me make
when I
this
see
point.
somebody who's hyper successful and leads a life I'd actually want to live, then I would want to emulate them. And the problem is most lefties do not lead lives that most people want to actually respect or emulate. So that's the problem. Like I'm not trying to be Vaush. Like I'm sorry, it's just not. There's never going to be a day where I look at the white Tacoma's weeping, and I'm thinking like I want to be that dude. But if I listen to someone like Andrew Tate, even if I find him repulsive, the dude very successful at what he's done, has the money, whatever. For a young man, he sees those markers of success, and that's much more something he would want to emulate over someone like Vaush, and that's why they have different.
That bad. Just like seeing like that kind of wealth as a marker of success, and therefore I want to emulate that. Like what kind of
how is that
unattainable
bad?
ideal is that?
Hold on. Think
Can she
about
explain
it.
why is it bad? Can you explain why it's bad?
Yeah.
Because why should your focus in life only be to try and become rich, which is incredibly unlikely?
Listen,
like,
listen,
not everyone's
listen.
gonna get a Bugatti.
Kelly, no,
okay?
Kelly.
Come on.
I grew up with a saying from my dad. My dad said, "Anyone who says money can't buy happiness doesn't have any." Like,
No, but
if there's a thing,
point
if there's a
at
thing in
which
life
it
that you
doesn't make that
want,
much
money will
difference.
facilitate it. That's the point. So
also,
I don't think it's like.
Also, I want to talk about. I want to kind of.
population that's going to be fucking Andrew Tate.
I also
want
to point out to like the effectiveness of messaging, right? So you got somebody who's struggling to keep a roof over their head, living paycheck to paycheck. What answer do you think is going to be the better message for them that's more than likely to bring them to your ideology or what you're talking about?
living paycheck to paycheck.
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
Capitalism is what's screwing you over, or hey, here's what you can actually do. Here's what you can actually do to maximize what you've got right now. What do you think is the better message? Because that person, I can guarantee you, does not know how to smash capitalism overnight to make their life better. So the simpler answer. Well, but we're talking about effective messaging. What's going to be more likely to bring them to you to seek more of your help or more of your information?
I mean, it's
right?
incredibly attractive. Yeah, it's like a honeypot thing. I can see a lot of people being
It's
like,
a means
"Oh, nice."
to whatever it is
But
that
it's
you want in
very
life.
unattainable.
No,
It's
obviously, well,
Hold up,
but-
hold up.
Hang on, no, because it doesn't go that way. They look at what the unattainable things are that you have, envy it, but then they tell you, here are the baby steps to just get more of what you've already got and use that to get even more. Right? So it's very direct, it's very immediate, it's something actionable that they can do. And then you got the progressive leftist person who's like, well, the problem is capitalism and we need to get rid of capitalism. And it's like, okay, well, how do I get rid of capitalism tomorrow so I'm not worried about having a roof over my head tomorrow?
I hard disagree.
Left-leaning people, I wouldn't be like,
Yes.
oh, capitalism, just give up and go to McDonald's and deal with it.
I hard-
I'd be like, well,
Destiny
get study
disagrees
and like,
with
get
this?
a better job. Yeah, sure, the one that you actually enjoy.
I don't think
focus
any
on
of
the
that.
guts.
I don't agree with any of that red pill advice being actionable. I think most of it is snake oil. They just have
Well, yeah.
they've attractively wrapped it up in a big package. I guarantee you that the vast majority of quote unquote red pill people that listen to these podcasts and get motivated to go to the gym and lose weight and all that shit, they drop off the wagon in probably 2 weeks tops. Because
But
just telling
it's-
somebody.
You have no way of proving. Hold on, you have
but
no way of
it
proving
has-
that, correct?
I have all of the history of human psychology. Just telling someone, go do it, you can do it, you can do it. That's not the way to motivate people. Like, there are measurable, real steps that you can take towards building, like, positive routines and stuff. None of these techniques are ever talked about in any Red Pill show ever. It's always just like, you're a piece of you can do it, blah, blah. And it might make you feel empowering for a little bit, the same way that talking about implementing any change can make you feel like you've already implemented it, but those people fall off the wagon. Like, you've never gone to, like, a Red Pill podcast live show or anything and seen a whole bunch of like shredded giga chads and shit in the audience. That's never the case.
Well, like I talk to these red
I was
pillars.
trying to say-
I
Well,
talk to
because
these
those
red
people
pillars in
have-
certain discords, and what I find is that they've bought into the red pill ideology, but they did like oftentimes fell off the wagon, but they still buy into the ideology. So they still carry the message. They still talk about it. They still hang around with red pillars and stuff. Even though they're not actually going and doing the self.
Yeah, I want to ask this: do you
stuff.
think that there's not an over? Do you not think that if you were to take a red pill convention versus like some kind of fucking libcuck convention, you wouldn't think you'd find more people that are physically fit?
You might, but it's not because they became fit listening to red pill shit. It's just because of the types of people that tend to run in both communities. Red pill
So you
people
think
don't give good self-improvement advice. They just tell you to self-improve. It's about
Okay,
as
so
worthless
what's
as
the
lefty
what's the
people
bad
saying
advice?
just what?
What's the bad advice that they give?
Just telling somebody to just improve or just fix your diet or just go to the gym is worthless advice. And trying to motivate somebody through like making them feel bad is also bad self-help advice. It doesn't work.
Is that how they give the advice?
there-
Yes.
Is that how they give it?
Yeah,
They
of
just say go work out. Is that all they say?
Basically, yeah. Unless there's people that have given more complicated or better, more nuanced things in terms of building habits or anything that I've just never heard before. But most of the red pill shit I've heard just sounds like the get ultra motivated shit of blah blah blah.
So,
Even though
hold
he's
on,
not
hold on,
technically
hold on.
red
Destiny,
pill,
I have
but
a
he's kind of
question for you.
adjacent. Hold on,
Hold on,
all right.
Destiny, I have a question. We've seen the tens of thousands of people that go up to Jordan Peterson crying, saying how
Yeah.
he's made their life better. Tell me the person running up
The
to Bernie
tens of
Sanders doing that,
thousands
or
of
anybody.
people? I disagree.
That's hyperbolic.
What?
But lots of people.
I don't know if
That's
that is.
hyperbolic.
Lots of people praise
Are
him for
y'all
that.
not aware?
And
The guy's
here's
got
a,
a 7.
Okay, I don't.
8-figure
There's like
job.
70 million people talking about it. I don't know who's saying anything.
well, I was just going to suggest Jordan Peterson because one of the things that people praise him for is that people say it's profound, but honestly, it's really simple. The whole clean your room thing, and people are like, "Oh my
Well,
god,
hold on.
this
No,
is
wait,
groundbreaking
no,
stuff,
wait.
12 rules of life." But it's pretty basic and simple,
Yeah.
and it is very tangible and actionable, and it does help people.
Jordan Peterson doesn't count as like one of these red pill guys because he actually does give good.
Yeah, I'm
that's
not
why I
talking
said
about
red
red
pill
pill.
adjacent.
Okay, yeah.
That's why I
Jordan
said-
Peterson counts as a good advice giver because Jordan Peterson has written books and is a psychologist and knows how to help people self-improve. But that's not
But
what you're
think-
finding on 99% of like self-improvement red pill fucking shows. It's usually just a whole bunch of fucking abuse to try to make you feel bad about yourself to get like the motivation, the agency to go and do shit.
That's true, but think about the original claim that this hinged off of. What I was saying is I was saying that conservatives overall are better at this messaging because it's more tangible. And you can find plenty of examples of red pill adjacent people as well as the red pill people who are providing a more tangible, simple answer for people that is at least more immediately actionable for them, even if they fall off the wagon soon afterward.
I think we're also discounting something. It's not just the advice. Because these people live a certain lifestyle, there's a constant reinforcement of that motivation, of a potentiality, of a future that is better than the one that they currently live. So it's not just they say the right things. They also emulate a lifestyle constantly. They constantly showcase that, and they're constantly around the women that these guys would want to date, and constantly doing the things that they want to do, that the people who are watching are much more likely to engage in positive behavior because they see that reinforcement all the time. It's not one-dimensional.
I understand, but the lifestyle is snake oil, right? Like, maybe I'm jaded because I come from my parents did Amway and shit. All the big Amway people, the way that they got rich was not by being good business people and building successful business. It was by selling self-help tips for Amway. It's the same thing with a lot of these red pillar guys. These guys aren't like super ultra successful businessmen that like made it in like the real world. They got popular on YouTube, pandering to audiences, right? Like, if you, no offense to any of the red pill guys, but like most of these guys made most of their money on YouTube, giving self-help. But to what? Become what? YouTubers? Like,
hold on. I would agree with you on the financial point. I do not agree with you on the fitness point. I do not believe that the actionable steps that you have to take to make your physical health substantially better is as complicated as trying to get rich from scratch. That's not the same thing. If someone's constantly reinforcing to me how I need to get physically in shape, and then by doing so, this unlocks different things and this and that, and they're constantly doing that, I don't have to create a business plan. I don't have to do the most complicated thing. I have to essentially change my diet and then go to the gym a bit consistently. Now, maybe I won't get to the point where I'm super ripped, but I will make improvements just by showing up on a regular basis. So I reject the notion that just because they give bad advice on a financial level, which I do agree with you, that it doesn't translate to make their lives markedly better in other areas.
Just by showing up on a regular basis. I'm like this participation trophy of fitness.
It's not just a participation trophy. If you take somebody who never goes to the gym ever versus someone who does and tries to make an effort for their diet, you're going to have substantially better results with the person who does. I'm not saying that they're going to turn into Sylvester Stallone, but there's actually incremental change that does happen to people who take a small amount of time at the gym on a semi-regular basis.
Sure.
I mean, the gym.
And also there's a biological thing that changes as well, because just by the virtue of you doing the physical activities, you actually get a biological response that's almost instantaneous. So
nobody is saying the gym is bad, Abba. We agree on that part.
Hold up, that's not what I said. You don't listen very well. So every time you reply, it has nothing to do with what I just said. But what I was
going on about the gym.
Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Make your point.
I'm saying we all agree with you when it comes to the fitness and health and the gym stuff, but it's the other stuff we don't agree with.
Yeah, like don't let the men in.
He's just talking about the distinction between selling something that is actionable to an individual for how to change their immediate circumstances.
Yeah, but we all agree with it, right? With the gym.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Destiny just sat here and basically said that most of their advice is snake oil and unuseful, and I would disagree.
No, but he agrees with the gym stuff.
You don't even know the second half of what I was gonna say. When
no,
I
but I know that he agrees with that because he spoke about it before.
Doesn't matter what he agrees with. We're talking about.
Okay. Hold on. I'm just gonna ignore what she said because she's going off pointless points. But Destiny, when you said they don't give good advice that actually makes their lives markedly better, I would argue that both on a dating standpoint and to fuck women, as you say, not to actually have relationships, but to fuck women. I do think they give these guys better opportunities as well as for fitness-related stuff and things like that.
And confidence, which helps them out in every other thing that they do.
Mans is not participating in this conversation. He's fucking... never mind. Don't blame him, honestly, for that, or he hasn't realised that he's muted.
I understand what you mean. I do think that, yeah, you're right. I think left-leaning people are worse about giving actionable individual advice or whatever. But I do think that like red pill and progressivism, like, you know how progressivism, they just like sell fucking opiating people based on their systemic oppression. They're black people. The reason your life sucks and you don't have everything you want is because the system is just stacked against you. I think the red pill does that as well. They're like, they're lonely, man. You're just lonely because of social media and sexual liberation of women, and they can have jobs now.
But Supreme, I think that's only a part of it. I think a part of it is not giving like personal prescriptions. I think the other part that me and Ab are talking about is the demonization of agency as well. It's not just that left-wing people don't
think
talk about
demonization of agency on the left.
What?
There definitely is.
What?
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Gambit.
Yeah, if you talk in any space of love people, and I don't mean just Twitter and Twitch and shit. I'm talking about real life offline people. They will demonize you if you say that some people should take agency in their own hands, especially if it's a minority group.
Demonize you for taking some agency in your own hands?
No, they demonize you for prophesizing that people should take agency.
Absolutely.
As if
they do demonize individualism, right? So they see that as being very liberal, and that's not appropriate. That is anti-progressive, etc. Because in order to be progressive, we have to be more collective in our approach to things and tackle things on a systemic level.
Doesn't it depend on the
or even telling people to take accountability when it comes to certain aspects of their life that are unpleasant or not going well, instead of like actually being supportive of that kind of messaging. They'll just be like, well, that's unfair. Talk about the system, systemic racism. I'm like, the entire messaging is always focused on the systemic stuff rather than the personal actionable stuff. So when you say the demonization of agency, that's where it comes from. It comes from the one-sided discussions that they traditionally have, and then the rejection of like personal accountability when it comes to a lot of circumstances. Like take rape, for example. You can't even say anybody may have contributed to certain situations.
Andrew Tate saying women who've been raped should take
Okay, so I'm going to finish my point because you just interrupted with something that had nothing to do with what I just said. And what I was trying to say is basically even on the topics of rape, right? If you tell people any actionable steps they can take in order to protect themselves and make sure they're good, people are saying you're creating rape culture or stupid stuff like that. That is the demonization of agency.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry. Can you run that one?
Well, like.
Okay. So I'll just say it one more time. I'll just repeat it so he can hear it. But basically, what I was trying to say.
There's a difference between giving advice to people to like potentially stop them from getting raped, I guess, and then Andrew Tate saying rape victims need to take responsibility.
Has anyone told you? Hold on, Kelly. I'm just curious, Kelly. Has anyone told you? Kelly. Has anyone ever told you have like Mr. Girl levels of like listening skills?
No, Abba, you just talk a lot. That's all.
Okay, well, you talk a lot too, but just nobody knows what you're talking about.
It's not a bad thing, but I'm just saying. It
is bad when you do it because you just derail conversations all the time.
Oh, I was talking about something you literally just said.
Well, he's talking about the left's or progressives' overall demonization of agency and individuals in the individual, and so
I know
it's not fair to compare that to Andrew Tate because he's not using Andrew Tate as an argument.
Didn't Destiny just tweet something as simple as, yo, you shouldn't engage in sex if you can't have complicated conversations around boundaries, and the entire world went bananas? Like it's ridiculous what like the left does with demonization of agency. Like it's obvious that if you're not a person that's ready to have some of these complex topics, then maybe engaging in sex isn't something you should do, and you should prioritize trying to figure out.
People took issue with that not because agency was being demonized, it's because they perceived that the focus was on the wrong party taking the agency to do or not do something. In this case, it was the issue with the person stealthing after
victim's agency that they could have used. He didn't say that they were to blame for rape, or I can't remember what the situation was, but he didn't say they were to blame for it. He just said, "Hey, here's a pointer on maybe how you could avoid these situations in the future."
The problem is that a lot of the advice that's given to like avoid these things in the future is just really obvious shit, and it just comes across as patronizing. Like, I'm not saying that there can't be some useful advice, because there definitely can, but what I was talking about more like hyperbolic statements, like what Andrew Tate said, because he is a red pillar and that is the side of where it's come from. I never meant that ABBA specifically was saying that kind of shit. But it's like, sometimes, like, is that helpful? How does that help if we ask women to take responsibility for their rape?
How does it help to tell men over and over again, don't rape?
Well, I think they're equally stupid. But like,
Kelly, the voice, you gotta stop doing the voice. Oh my god.
The reason why there's such a negative reaction to that type of advice is because historically we've had a long issue of people.
I don't know what to do. I can't have 20,000 fucking people. This conversation is so fucking autistic. Holy shit. It's like
of men raping women. It's like, what was she wearing? Was she drinking? Blah, blah, blah. And put all of the agency on the woman, all the responsibility on the woman. And so there's been sort of this pendulum swing in the other direction, which is to say, no, men need to fix their shit. We're not responsible for this crap anymore, which it shouldn't be. It should be somewhere around the middle where women, and just vulnerable people in general are taking some precautions and such and looking out for themselves, and then men are also socialized to be a little bit less fucking rapey, right?
Yeah, but the majority of rape is by partners, right? And it's like people by people, so it's like, okay, it's like we'll protect ourselves when we're walking down a dark alley, I guess, but it's like a lot of this stuff is quite obvious and it doesn't really help. Like, there's not really anything that to be gained by saying it.
So you can say some of these things are obvious, but in certain situations, they don't appear to be obvious. There was a panel where we were talking about women should come for it as soon as possible, right? Because, like, the the possibility of convicting somebody in a rape case is already bad. Lack of physical evidence and blah blah blah, right? So coming forward as soon as possible, using rape kits, all of this stuff seems to be reasonable advice. But we can see
That's
that.
fine. That's fine. I
But
agree.
no, but even that type of conversation is demonized. Oh my God,
Well,
like she's dealing with all of this mental stuff and like, oh my, you should be talking to the men and blah blah blah. Like that type of shit happens. Maybe wherever you exist, that type of rhetoric doesn't happen. But somebody said you were from not from America, but here in America, that shit happens. You will get demonized for saying,
yeah,
"Hey, women, you
I,
should come forward as soon as possible."
I mean, I
When
can
you-
explain it a little bit if you want me to, but it's like, so yes, in an ideal world, you should go directly to the police, and reality
Wait,
is...
you said if we wanted you to, but we didn't take a vote.
Pardon?
No, let her speak.
Alright.
God
What
damn
is
it.
alright? But people... anyway, never mind. But like in an ideal world, yes, that would always happen. But the thing is, women aren't not going to the police because they don't already know that. There's usually some other mitigating factor that's stopping them from going. So it's like, we already know that we can go to the police station to report things, and I don't think there's any woman on the planet that doesn't know that. So it's like,
But don't you think we
forces.
should pressure
Well,
women to do that
there's-
regardless
no,
of
no, no,
whatever
hold on.
extenuating circumstances
Wait.
exist?
No, because the reason
No.
is that
And
when
by
you get-
pressure, I mean socially pressure. I don't mean directly on one individual, right? I'm saying
No.
socially, we should encourage this. You don't think we should encourage women
Because
to go to the
it's-
police as soon as
Well,
possible?
we
Encourage, not
should.
pressure.
Yeah,
That's the same
so the
thing
problem is that when
socially.
you get raped by someone,
Sorry, hold on, real
particularly like
quick.
your own
Pressure
partner-
and encourage are the same thing socially. That
Same
means the
thing.
exact
Yeah,
same
same
thing.
So,
Okay.
Oh, they're
but
not the same.
They're actually the
The
exact
exact
same
Literally
thing.
not.
They're literally the same thing. Social encouragement is social pressure. If I ask you, do you want to smoke some crack, and I'm next to you, you'd say, oh, that's kind of a little bit of social pressure. It'd be cool if you smoked some crack. It'd be cool if you reported a rape at the police station. Social pressure and social encouragement are the same thing.
So
I don't know about
the
that.
problem. So
Literally
I
not.
think we should encourage or pressure, however you put it. But the thing to keep in mind is that when people get raped, oftentimes by their partners, there's a psychological thing that you end up dealing with, which is you kind of, a lot of times you end up convincing yourself or trying to convince yourself that there wasn't something wrong, or that it was something that you did, or something like that. There's a lot of psychology behind it. So it oftentimes takes some time to work through that psychology to get to the point where you actually realize, oh fuck, this really was.
Yeah, there's a lot of
what it
psychology
was.
behind not raping somebody too. You're horny, you're stupid, you're desperate, whatever. Yeah, of course. But that doesn't mean that you just give up on it. Otherwise, we should just not try to do anything for anything ever, because there's a lot of
We need-
psychology and pressure behind everything.
Yeah, I think that we should encourage people to come forward as soon as possible, but we also have to understand why it is that they often don't.
I
There are
agree
other
with
mitigating
this.
factors as well.
I agree, which is why I said we should try to publicly pressure, or the other word that y'all want to use, but we should try to publicly pressure the people to come forward so that messaging becomes more like more tangible to them than all the other mental things that are happening. Because
I mean,
the
I definitely
likelihood of having a conviction after 5 years when you come forward, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't call out people that do these things, blah blah blah, but when we do wait this amount of time, it becomes unlikely that a person will have to serve any type of punishment or there'll be any type of justice, right? So
I do think it would be good if there were more things put in place so that women would feel more comfortable to go do that. Because going to the police station, which is always a majority male, is just like, I've had to do it. It was not a fun experience. If there were more like clinics or some kind of options that you could go to that weren't like going to the male-dominated police station all the time, that would also be good. It's not like the best experience.
I don't
a lot
think
of the
so.
times.
I don't think that this is a really good measure of like demonizing agency so much as it is like a double standard for men and women. People just expecting less from women than they are from men, which I think happens in left-leaning spaces for sure. Because I think people expect the agency of men to look for signals of rejection and respect them or whatever the fuck, but then they don't expect women to like give them strongly or something like that. I don't think this is like a blanket, whatever, removing of agency from individuals and promoting that as a virtue.
Yeah. I mean, I had a really good conversation yesterday with some friends talking about that, and like because we had like half the group call was women and half the group call was men. It was really interesting to see just a vast different understanding and perspective of like what men see in certain actions versus what women see in certain actions. Talking about actually the conversation with what was who was it who the whole thing brought the girl over after a date and she said that's a nice countertop, and he said, it looked nicer with you on it.
Aziz.
Yeah, and like unanimously, the men in the call were like, "Oh yeah, that he's testing to see if she wants to fuck," and her jumping on it is confirmation, right? Unanimously, they said that, and the women in the call were like, "What? Are you fucking crazy? No, I would just be playful or something if a guy said
No
that."
shot. I don't even
You're saying
believe
the
that
women
women
are
believe
naive?
that.
You're
If the
saying
women
women
said
are
that, then
naive?
they're
So-
so f***ing stupid. All of them need permanent f***ing caretakers, and they should be
And
adopted by the
so-
state.
And so, yeah, there's like very different understanding of both sending and receiving signals from men to women. And that's something that, so I think that's something that should definitely be talked about a lot more and opened up about. And just so that there's more cross-pollination of the differences between the way men see things and what they're looking for, and the difference between how women see things and what they're looking for. And I think that would help
Zonia.
out in that equation.
Zonia, you know I love you, right? Like, were the women involved in this like, were they people that go outside often? Like, I find it hard to believe that a panel of women would have thought that wasn't like trying to hit on them in some way. Like, are you saying that every woman that was in this panel that you're talking about just
It
assumed
was pretty. I mean, it was a small call, right? But yeah, it was evenly divided, men to women, and but yeah, it was. They pretty much were like, "What? What are you talking about?" So yeah.
Well, they haven't gotten the claw, so
Supreme, do you feel like now that you've listened a little bit more, do you feel like there is some element of the left that demonizes agency?
Demonizes agency? No, I'm not sure. I think that the left is worse about opiating people and like patting them on the back for not taking more agency or something, or for feeling like the agency that they've taken hasn't resulted in fruit, or it hasn't like bore fruit or whatever the fuck. But demonizing agency, I'm not so sure. I have seen some examples of what you're talking about where people have a really shallow, because ultimately what I think the distinction is that like on the left we tend to focus more on certain things where like individual agency is not. There are certain problems in society where that can't be solved by individual agency, but people have some people I have seen have a shallow engagement with that, where they say stuff like charity is a band-aid, charity can't be the fix for this, and then they extend that to say charity is useless. It's like no, good things can come out of charity. Fine, sure, maybe there are some problems for which charity shouldn't be the only solution or something, but I don't think that extends to like a blanket.
Well, some of them take it further. The institution of charity only exists because of the capitalist pigs, and we should just have socialism.
Sure, yeah. And I would say, the further left you go, the more I think that there's not a demonization of agency, but that agency is completely removed from people on the bottom or something like that, and we can have no expectations of individuals. I understand what you mean.
Yeah, that's a way better way of putting
are...
it, because I see it as more of a agency isn't solving the problem, and again, like you were saying,
or even like literally
people
there's
at the
nothing
bottom.
you can do. It's futile.
Yeah,
because the system is stacked against you.
I think people are
Or
pretty
it's actually
bad.
bad to do so, because if you try to encourage people to have agency, you're actually doing an evil thing. In
I
the
think
case of
people
like
look
telling
pretty-
people to take care of their own safety and their own security, whether it be like arming yourself, whether it be like taking these classes, like telling people this is a prescription you should take, is actually harming them or contributing to rape culture or whatever kind of culture.
I
Well-
think people are pretty bad in general at both overestimating and underestimating how much control they have over their lives in certain aspects. And
I think-
that's just across the board.
Abba, I think you're just talking about specific values or action, or what you're talking to speaks to the specific values of left people, because there are certainly conservatives who think that taking the agency to do certain things is bad, taking the agency to get an abortion, taking the agency to, whatever, like take your whatever 14-year-old to consider like gender transitioning or something like that.
Well, no, I think the abortion topic is a bit different. I think their problem isn't that you have agency in your life. Their problem is that you'd have agency over what they consider to be a human life. That's a different question and a different topic at all. I don't think I hear conservatives trying to take away people's agency for the most part, and I certainly don't think abortion is an example of them wanting to take away
Fair enough,
people's
you're right.
agency.
That's an example of them granting agency to a fetus.
Exactly. So it's it's a different discussion.
I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
No, you may disagree on what a fetus is. I don't really care. That's not I'm not anti-abortion, whatever it might be. I'm generally pro-choice, but I'm trying to say that I don't think that's their mindset they're coming from.
Okay, maybe this
Yeah.
is kind of a red herring then. Still, I think maybe if I had some time to think about it, I could think of some better examples. But I think, again, you're talking about taking the agency to do things that contradict the values of left-leaning people. It's not necessarily the agency itself.
Well,
No, hold on, wait, stop,
right-leaning
hold
people,
on, wait. It is a fact that conservatives tend to be more empowering and give more agency than liberals. There's literally the phrase, conservatives never see themselves as poor people, just temporarily embarrassed billionaires, right? Conservatives, every conservative feels like, because that's what they're told, anybody could be anything, you can do whatever, like America's the freest country on the planet, everybody comes here because you've got the opportunity to be anything. Conservatives constantly sell that empowering mindset, and it feels like people on the left tend to attack people that are successful by equating every single measure of their success to luck, right? This guy had rich parents, this guy went to Harvard, this guy was white, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When left-leaning people focus on systems so much, you can never really get credit from systems, or the credit you get from systems sucks, and all systems are used to tear people down, right? If somebody's successful, it's just because they were set up to be successful. And if somebody's not successful, it's because of white supremacy or colonialism or whatever, right? That's a pretty disempowering system to live inside.
And I also will say, from a minority standpoint, this is one of the biggest pet peeves I have, because all discussions are always just focused on systemic stuff, and if you bring in a different side of the aisle, you're ostracized or called a coon or whatever the fuck it might be. That is a form of demonization, though while not direct, actually plays into the whole idea of you being a perpetual victim, even the whole idea of like model what is it, model minority, things like that. Yeah, it's like most black people want to be model minorities, like it's this whole thing that's oppressive inherently. Like, I just reject these notions. So whilst you may not see the demonization, sometimes it's not always in what they say, but what they don't allow other people to say, or how they demonize other people for saying those things. And that definitely happens in minority communities all the time.
Yeah, look at Candace Owens' whole like leaving the plantation thing, right?
Absolutely.
For us, it's like pick me is what we get as trans people.
I wouldn't say that's demonizing agency. I would say that that's implicating somebody for the agency that they're taking for doing something that's contradicting the values of that community or something. When somebody
that isn't with the collective, you kind of get labeled the traitor because you're not going to be part of the collective.
Were you on my stream?
Whoa, hold on. When not being part of the collective is because you're taking agency. They're demonizing agency. I don't really care what you call it.
Their agency to do something that undermines like their own best
from their
interest.
perspective.
Were you here when we were doing the math book Wicked Supreme?
No.
Did you see any of that, Abba?
Wait, I might have. Can you describe it? Was it the thing about...
It's the minority math book to help black people learn how to do algebra.
Oh my god, it's the most racist shit ever. I didn't see your stream on it.
I had a guy that wanted to come on and argue it, and we went through the book like chapter by chapter or whatever, and like it's pretty insanely fucking crazy, in my opinion.
It's racist. No, call it what it is.
I would
argue encouraging infantilization even is a form of demonizing agency, because you're literally taking people's ability to self-determination and turning them into children of the state or children of circumstances, and removing their adulthood. There's a lot of different ways that these things happen. Take the agency of an 18-year-old and whether or not they can consent to things. The left will always say, well, you're not ready to actually have sex. That is a demonization of agency. I don't know how you don't see that, because they're constantly trying to alleviate the responsibility of the individual with every issue.
I think I can answer this. I think I'm just being autistic about your use of the word demonization. I think I agreed with this. I feel like I already talked about this a lot, where I said, you're right. I think the left does more to sort of try to remove the agency or like opiate people or fucking, pat them on the back for things not working out and saying, don't worry, no matter how much agency you express here, you wouldn't have gotten your way because the system is stacked against you. I agree with that. But I don't think necessarily, like, demonizing agency, I would say, is if you ever do anything, it's a bad thing.
Well, no. That's a weird way.
Let me bridge the gap.
That's a weird way to take it. Hold on, because you posed that to me. When I say demonization, basically by the definition, it's making something seem wicked or threatening or bad. That's what it means. That's what it means. And so when someone is 19 or 20, they want to fuck somebody, but then people are like, you're not ready, you've just done a bad thing, or something bad has happened to you. Yes, they're basically saying that you don't have the ability to consent, you don't have the ability to make an adult. That is removing people's agency and making it seem like it's a bad thing that they want to be able to make these choices. So I would call that the demonization of agency. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
No, yeah, I don't know. I think there's still a disconnect.
Okay.
So I think
you can call it like stigmatizing. You can use a different word. It's the same.
Not
meaning,
even
though.
stigmatizing. It's more like just coming up with reasons why a person's agency is irrelevant or that it has no use or something like that. It's removing a person's agency.
stigmatize. So this is what I'm thinking. So Supreme, I think you're seeing like demonization of agency would be a much more explicit and direct thing of like agency bad, doing anything independent of the group is bad. But a lot of leftists actually do think that independence and agency are necessary and a good thing at times. The question is, do they agree with the type of agency you have taken? And when they don't agree with it, that's when they demonize you and label you as like, a traitor or, a C word or.
I don't think I don't think this is what we're talking about. I think we're just talking about in general, how much control does somebody have over their destiny? That's essentially what we're talking about. And conservatives try to make it sound like everybody is like the master of their own destiny. They can do whatever they want. And people on the left sometimes make it seem like you're just a victim of the system and nothing you can do is ever going to change that.
Yes.
I said that about 5-10 minutes ago that people underestimate the amount of control they have over them.
That's the whole political landscape, right? Conservatives want decisions to be made as local as possible, and as leftists, we think that there are some things that are best left up to the state or federal government, right? Because it's not reasonable to leave that into the hands of individuals, and that turmoil or fight is where a lot of this happens. And some people incorrectly place too many things at the level of the state, and that's where conservatives win.
I mean, there's a reason why all the gym shit right now is associated with the right and health at every size is associated with the left. That's all I'll say.
Yes.
Exactly. Wait, what stuff? Sorry, I missed that. The gym stuff on the right, what stuff on the left?
Health at every size.
Oh, health at every size. Yeah. Yeah, fair. Yeah, certainly. I think this disparity exists. But even then, that's promoting a person's agency to eat whatever the fuck they want.
No, stop. That's attacking a person's agency to lose weight because you're going to be a victim of no matter what. Your metabolism is always fucked and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, it's not. It's attacking...
I can't tell if you're trolling right now. It's okay. I'm playing StarCraft, so I'm getting triggered if you're
I'm sorry,
trolling me.
Healthy at every size is about it's about discouraging people from making fun of other people for being fat or judging other people for being fat. It's about giving the agency to people to be as unhealthy as they want.
No, it's
I think
also
the message is a
agency.
disaster. It's like the ACAP message, right?
It's
like
also
the message is
removing
terrible.
Healthy
at any size.
What part about that do you disagree with?
Health at every size is saying you can be healthy and beautiful no matter what size you are, and it's okay. It's okay to be a victim of your body, or it's okay to be a victim of hypothyroidism. It's okay to be a victim of your fast metabolism. There's nothing you can do to change it. That's okay. The more extreme versions of health at every size are that. That's not a celebration of agency. It's a direct contradiction.
Slogan. Yeah, and it's the slogan that's a real problem, kind of like ACAB, right? Those kinds of slogans
you're right.
are not
I think there are definitely parts where it's like, yeah, it's just part of your biology. There's nothing you can do about it. You're just going to be fat. You're right. That part of it, sure. I guess there's other parts of it where people talk about being fat phobic or something like that. I think that's more about judging people for their life choices or something, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, these general like feel-good slogans are, I don't know, they just seem like they're giving people a lot of excuses to not try and do things that are better for themselves.
I mean, the reality is a lot of people are really unhealthy, though. They just don't necessarily look it. And a lot of fat people get dogged on for being lazy, etc., when other people are just as lazy and useless and worthless human beings as the fat people.
Yeah, but it's the biggest whataboutism ever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
For being lazy and procrastinating too.
Yeah, but it's easy to see that they potentially might be lazy because
they are.
You don't see all the skinny, lazy bums.
It doesn't matter. That's
such
a stupid fucking whataboutism. I don't know why you'd even bring it up.
No, I'm just saying, like, you're using like a visual precursor.
Because a visual precursor can be a decent indicator of somebody's health. Kelly, do you want to bet that we could probably look at most people and get a rough eyeball guesstimate about how healthy they are? You probably can. You could probably do that at a glance.
You can be lazy, dumb bitch, and be skinny.
You can also, you could also be incredibly fucking...
example.
Kicker. Oh my god, I'm getting fucking triggered. I'm so fucking triggered right now. Okay.
I would say that generally, yeah, you can eyeball someone and get a pretty good idea of whether or not they are healthy or unhealthy.
Sorry.
Speaking, you right? Like, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, no shit. It's fucking reasonable.
Obviously, they're outliers. You know, you can have cancer or something that isn't quite shown on the surface. Or
true.
Like that.
Wow. Oh my God. You could have AIDS and not see it. True. Yeah. What other things do we want to bring up that obviously we would all agree with?
I said they're outliers.
Yeah, then why bring up outliers?
I'm agreeing with you.
Ridiculous examples, right? You could have an alien that possesses your body and a fungal infection about to turn you into a zombie.
Can I just appreciate? And you might have been trolling.
Saying they're outliers.
You might have been trolling. I don't know, but I think this is actually some part of the rhetoric on the left that turns people off, because it almost, even though that's not what you were trying to do, it almost sounds like you guys are denying basic truths or basically running interference for things that we all know are bad, and by doing it in the most disingenuous ways, or some of the ways that seem to appear the most slimy. So like most people who witness these conversations, like what Kelly said, people had seen on CNN and every other news network where people are like, basically touting out the fat acceptance, and the talking points are the same. And when you hear it, you just like, why would you say this stuff? Literally everybody listening knows this is pretty much a lie, and it turns people off from the message of the left because it just sounds so pathetic.
Does the left do that more than the right, though?
I think the left has
on social issues. Okay. I would say yes.
The left has a big problem with reality denial sometimes. Yes, but the right does too. Right? It just depends on the issue. But for social issues, it seems like the left has a big problem.
Okay, that's a fair qualifier.
The right does it with like scientific issues for sure, but nobody cares as much about that shit.
Like I'm in a lot of right-wing spaces. I work with like the local Republicans and stuff like that. Some of our biggest issues come down to the fact that everybody does focus on like being
social shit.
Everyone wants everything. Like, look at the fucking the responses to like social media and shit. Everybody wants to make their own platform. Nobody can just get on the same page and be like, okay, fucking Billy made the first platform. Let's all just go there. No, like there's like 12 fucking answers to Twitch and Twitter and all this crap. It's kind of a big
I would
issue.
say the health at every side stuff is like science denialism, right? To some degree. I guess it can happen on the left, but that's also a much further left thing. I guess I was confusing health at every size versus like beauty on the inside.
You say so here's the problem. You say it's a much further left thing, and I don't necessarily disagree. The problem is the left refuses to disavow this stuff. So you look like you're adjacent to it, or you're into it, or you're just quiet about it because you agree. And so the left has been like that about a lot of social issues. They were actually like that with defund the police initially. Like a lot of them probably did disagree, but because they didn't say anything, it made the whole left look bad. Or I just remember that Bernie moment where he got cooked on stage, and most of the leftists didn't barely say anything, and like everybody knew that was markedly wrong, but because they didn't want to appear to make like super progressives mad, they ended up looking like retards themselves. And so they look like they're all part of the same movement. Their inability to disavow some of the more extreme rhetoric is what leads to them being then judged by that most extreme stuff.
Yeah, that is true. That's an issue. That's something I just frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Kenosha riots, I guess that came up earlier today. I wanted to call in and ask you, Destiny, about like when can we say that it's actually like a moral good if people are causing wanton destruction of your local community to go in armed and like defend the fucking,
I think as an American, depending on the society and because of the society that we sit in, I think you always have the moral authority to do that. I think you should be able to defend your property with your life. Fuck it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would even say that it's like a moral good.
Yeah, of course I would say so. Yeah, I would. Yeah. If that means that white militiamen need to
no,
step two,
do the thing.
Ultimately, I think like a lot of the people that participated in the Kenosha riots, I think ultimately like left-leaning people, part of the aesthetic that Democrats sell or that is sold in liberalism or something is like moral superiority that's secular over conservatives or something like that. And so I do think that there's maybe a propensity to start accepting things that seem nicer on its face or something. That's probably what has more to do with things like. Like people accepting that riots are good or something like that if it tears down an oppressive system. Probably most of those people were Democrats before then or something like that. But then I think there was a lot of bandwagoning and like wrangling by more further leftists or something like that sort of took advantage of the goodwill of like left-leaning people at large. That's in response to ABBA when I said, it's like further left people, and you said, yeah, but it's also like mainstream Democrat people too, and I think that's.
This is something I brought up before. The thing I think I identified this like 3 or 4 months ago, that the problem with these fringe left positions is that even though they are fringe, it seems like most people on the left will defend them. So like there isn't this epidemic of people coming out with 4-year-old trans kids. It's incredibly rare, but. They're like when somebody comes out and does say it, it seems like everybody on the left online wants to defend it. That's what it feels like. Instead of just being like, okay, these guys are kind of wacky, and then moving on from it. So that's what
without even knowing.
Yeah, that's what gives conservatives the ammunition. Like that Libs of TikTok account, that shit that account posts, everybody should look at it and be like, most of this shit is kind of wacky, and then boom, then you move on. But when you defend it, you give conservatives ammunition to feel like there's like a huge movement behind the stuff that's going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
I feel the same way about the whole.
That seems to be team sports in general, because conservatives also will just either ignore or even forgive the more extreme positions on their end as well.
The fervent defense of Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, what have you.
Yeah, and like overlooking, overlooking like legitimate white supremacists in the movement and shit and just ignoring it. Like that just seems to exist in team sports across the spectrum. It doesn't matter which side you're on. The difference is, I would say, for like the left, what I perceive is that the fringe left will demonize the not so fringe left. So they'll demonize those who are not.
That
as far
happens
to the
with
left as
happens with Republicans too. They're just just a
Yeah.
little because there's
rhinos
tons
now.
of infighting.
Yeah, it's not quite as vicious, I would say, but yeah, it's definitely growing. And it's
The
been something-
infighting
They're just
tends
not
to
on
be
the
more
public
detrimental.
platforms as much doing it. You guys
Yeah.
are fucking just all over everything.
It tends to be more detrimental on the
Put all
left
your
when it
shit out there.
happens.
Yeah.
Okay, you just keep.
I mean, I don't know. We're saying that now, but in 1 year, like the Republican Party might be torn asunder from the f***ing Trump shit. So we'll see.
Are they getting them each other fired from each other's jobs?
It's not about getting fired from jobs. Like I'm pretty sure. Didn't Trump just call DeSantis a groomer?
Yeah, and he also called him.
yeah.
He called him Meatball Ron, which I think is a great.
He hasn't even declared to fucking.
Yeah,
run.
so that shit
That's
might
true.
be,
It may be.
that might be like the
saying that
most
he's-
bloody primary like in conservative history.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
enjoying
if you
it.
compare the entire gamut of like the left-leaning representatives in Congress, from the squad to the most establishment Dems or whatever, compared to the right, yeah, it definitely looks like there's a lot more cohesion on the left right now.
Nah.
Nah.
Oh, there's a massive war going
What?
on the right now.
Have you heard of like MTG and George Santos and holy shit, Matt Gaetz?
Yeah,
there's
for
kind
the
of a lot going
for the
on.
mainstream politics, it's a massive fucking war in
What's the
conservative
furthest
land right
left
now.
congressperson, GSUGambit?
Hello, Mel.
AOC is a
AOC.
DemSoc, right? So AOC would be the
Yeah.
furthest. up.
Yeah, and how does AOC
Hi.
look compared to the rest of our party? How does she vote in line with them? Is there a lot of like, is there a rift between AOC and the rest of the, the Democrats?
Oh, well, when you say party, if you only talk about the politicians themselves, then maybe, yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that. Because they couldn't even confirm like a minority leader, right? So, yeah, if we're talking,
That was wild.
yeah, if